So listeners, welcome to the Halloween special episode. Look, any deep dive is special for Push2Plat. Any deep dive requires me finishing the game, which is a massive achievement, as you know, listeners. So this is a special deep dive. I'm joined here by the resident Darrel from the Loot Bros.
What's up, ZJ?
And today we are going to be deep diving the Maid of Sker. Now, it is Sker, Darrel. I've been saying Sker for some time, but it is actually Sker. Were you aware of that?
You know, it wasn't until they say it in the game that I'm still calling it Sker for whatever reason.
Okay, good. I'm sort of locked into that. Now, if you don't know this game, it's developed by Wales Interactive. They're a UK-based developer. It was released on the 28th of July, 2020, although originally planned for release in 2019 before it underwent some delays to its final form. It's available on the PS4, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and PC, and currently at time of listening, it is a game with gold on the Xbox, and therefore free, around a half-price game on other platforms. Now, Darrel, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Wales Interactive. They're best known for their FMV games, Late Shift the Bunker, and the Shape-Shifting Detective, but they also made Don't Knock Twice, not an FMV game.
So I believe I have Platinum Don't Knock. I know I Platinum the Bunker. I own the Late Shift, and I've never played the last one.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people would agree that Don't Knock Twice was an interesting experiment away from the FMV genre, but there were many fatal flaws with that game, even though it was only a short game. So this is really their first, well, I suppose their second foray into horror, but their first really substantial foray into horror. So let me give you some background here, listeners, first. And what we'll do with this deep dive is we'll talk a little bit about the mechanics of the game or whatever else, but then we will move obviously into spoilers. So if this is a game that you do wish to play and experience, and it's a game that can be completed in around 4 to 5 hours quite comfortably, then I do suggest that you go away and play it first. So the story was inspired by the 3-part novel The Maid of Sker by R.D. Blackmore, as well as the Welsh and British folklore tales. The fictional Sker Island and hotel is based on, now Darrel, it's based on a real-life house that's located outside of Porthcawl near Bridgend, Wales. So it's a real place, which is interesting. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. That's pretty crazy.
So let's give you some background, listeners. Relax, close your eyes, turn the lights off, and let's no, hang on, don't move the hand away from there.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, on the controller, the other controller. Thank you. 1889, Sker Island, remote, overgrown, desolate, unsettling. Sker House. Arriving on an eerie ghost train, you, the protagonist, Thomas Evans, a struggling musician, harp player and composer, arrive to aid the request of your lover, Elizabeth Williams, daughter of the owners. Elizabeth has returned earlier to the hotel to search for the mysterious reasons behind her family's disappearance and the current dormant state of the hotel. Her twisted journey of discovery into the realm of sinister darkness, insanity, and stories thought long lost to fable stir the hotel's inhabitants. The creaking of old timber, rattling window panes, clang of old pipes, and murmurings of curtain drapes mark the shifting of time, augmented with the dissonance of wandering souls driven by the wailing song of ecstasy surging with a deep, primal evil. Cries of torture, minds long lost, and madness realized in illusions of scientific fantasies meet Elizabeth. Now trapped between the safety of the known world and the realities of Sker Hotel, she takes her place as a pawn in an endgame that calls to you, Thomas, as it has called before to composers. The hope of a counter-song to reclaim the darkness and force light into depravity. But perhaps the family, bathed in the ecstasy of a beautiful, otherworldly melody from an innocent, mythical beast, have merely been marking time in their living hell. Standing between darkness and light, fable and truths, you must attempt to restore order and decide the outcome in a world resembling a tumbling kaleidoscope, where not everything is as pure, safe, and virtuous as we are led to believe. The Maid of Sker resident Darrel, did you enjoy this experience?
Overall, I enjoyed it. It had some really, really unique gameplay elements and mechanics, some things that I thought were really cool. As a survival horror fan, it paid homage to, some of my favorite games in the genre. It had some jank, a little B tier flair, but overall, it was a pretty rad game,
Yeah, it's an interesting game. If we start from the beginning. Now, I didn't know what to expect because I'd done no backgrounding in this game at all. And you do arrive on this ghost train or whatever else, and it strikes you straight away as a walking simulator. You walk through the train, you walk through the woods. You're going around the back to the hotel, and it just hit me like some sort of everyone's gone to the Rapture type feeling game here. That this is going to be like a bit of a discovery game, perhaps a bit of exploration, and then it quickly, well, I suppose it didn't quickly, but then you arrive at the hotel and it started to interest me, Darrel. So I suppose my question here is, it's not a fast starting game by any stretch of the imagination. Were you intrigued? Were you drawn in to the hotel or not?
I was, but maybe not for the same reasons you were. There are some really similar aspects to the hotel and the mansion from Resident Evil. So, and I started the game on my anniversary with my wife, and I was like, look at this. You walk into the main hall and there's this giant stairwell, very reminiscent to the mansion in Resident Evil. If you look to the left and to the right, there are two locked gates. Again, very reminiscent to Resident Evil. To the left, you could go through a corridor that will take you eventually to a dining hall. To the right, is some other rooms. And it was just it's not a one-to-one, but as far as the map is concerned, it was very Resident Evil. And I really appreciated that, and it felt really cool. Like I said in the Push2Plat episode we did together, it feels like people who grew up playing these games were making a game reminiscent of what they enjoyed, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Now, I mean, the pervasiveness of the Resident Evil series is very strong in this game. Now, one of the things that I liked about this game that I have a problem with in the Resident Evil series is the saving mechanics. Now, this game does not use an auto-save. It uses gramophones, if you like, to save your progress. You have safe rooms and you go in. In Resident Evil, predominantly, you have to find the cartridges, though, to save, and there's a limited number of saves in this game. And now, of course, depending on the difficulty you play, if you play on hard, there are only 10 saves, but if you play on easy, you can have unlimited saves. And it actually took me to a fair portion into the game, Darrel, to realize you could save more than once at each of these gramophones. I thought perhaps they were a one-time thing. And but as a result, it makes the game a lot more fairer, I suppose, and more approachable. Did you enjoy that mechanic? Do you think that perhaps it also detracts from the game because there are fairly well spaced save points?
Well, as a longtime survival horror fan and player of Resident Evil games, that was kind of a staple in the older games that has kind of gone away with the more modern stuff. To an extent, I mean, like Resident Evil 7 brought it back, but the older games you had to find an ink ribbon, and if you if you used them all on your saves, then you were done. You couldn't save anymore, and there was nothing more tense than progressing for an hour or two and not being able to save because you don't want to take risks. With this game, I started the game off on normal. I didn't look at the achievement list or anything like that. And I was like, I'll just start off the game on normal playthrough and see what happens. And I don't know that I noticed that there was a difference with how many times you could save depending on the difficulty. It wasn't until I actually died a couple times in the game from just making really dumb mistakes that I bumped the difficulty down because I wanted to make sure I made it through the game. And then I noticed that it said something. It was like you do get more saves, more resources, and things like that. So, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, as far as like going to the record player, the gramophone, it was neat. Again, it was a bit of a callback, a bit of paying homage to, again, Resident Evil and games like that, where it's like, yeah, you had to go to a certain spot and save. So interesting. I liked it.
Yeah, one of the things that I like too is that the game doesn't explain a lot at the start, but as you get in further and further, you can find maps and you start to find out about these safe rooms and you start to realize these things. They have a green door, but early on in the game, I'm thinking here after the cemetery scene, Darrel, where you fall into the grave, there's a whole section there with like not challenging puzzling. There's not a huge amount of challenging puzzling at all in this game, but there's a good run of a section there where there's actually a save room, but it's sort of in the shadows on the right, and there's no map. There are sections of this game that do have no map. It's very easy to just walk straight past that room, which is what I did, and I progressed a fair way past that, and I died. And of course, you go back to your last save point. So for me, that was like about an hour's progress I lost, I think. And then I found it the second time, and I was like, oh, this would have been so much better if I'd found it the first time.
Agreed. I did the same thing. I think I lost about an hour and 40 minutes of progress. And,
Yes.
that's kind of hard to come by. And so
Yes.
it was like one of those things to where I looked up this game on how long to beat. It said an average of 4 hours. So I know the rule of thumb. If how long to beat says 4 hours, it's going to take me 6 to 8 hours to beat the game. And then when I lost an hour or so of progress, I actually got stuck in the game because it doesn't hold your hand on where to go. You have a map.
No.
And you do find sections of the map to update your map, but it doesn't really explain where you need to go. It almost gives you an illusion of open world, or open corridor. Like you could go to any one of these places to, look for the objects and that you need to solve the puzzles. And it was very interesting. I don't know that you can do everything out of order, but it felt that way.
It's a really interesting thing because one of the first, I was taking notes as I played, and about an hour in, the first major note I took was, is this a linear game or not? And for exactly that reason, and obviously here, listeners, what you're doing, the premise is you're trying to find 4 musical cylinders that have been engraved, if you like, for a harmonium that can be put in, and then the machine will play this song. And then you're also trying to find 4 manuscripts that are what they call the counter song, if you like, that will unwork the evil, written by composers. So they're the 8 main things you're finding in the game, and you have puzzles and various things. But there is this, early on it feels linear, but as you say, when you get to the hotel, it feels very open. But then it's amazing, you are sort of guided at the same time, I thought. And that's why I asked that question, because about 2 hours in, I'm like, well, am I really doing whatever I want, or am I being guided in this direction, even though I only know loosely that I'm trying to find these objects? And I think that the use of the telephone and the talking, if you like, Elizabeth talking here to you, I thought that was a clever mechanic of maybe keeping you on track without, and the illusion that you weren't playing in a linear game. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I don't know. I didn't really get that from it. To me, it felt like I had, I'm trying to think about the best way to word it. Yeah, it's a linear game, but I didn't really feel like it was linear based on the fact that you don't really close an entrance or an exit. So you could, and I said this before, I kind of got lost a little bit because I had went through the cemetery area and I had went through, the surrounding areas. You go, I went back into the hotel, was kind of unlocking some areas, and I was like, I missed something. And it was actually the section with the beer tap. Like I had the beer tap in my hand, but in my mind, it was like, oh, you have this wooden plank.
Yes.
and I just didn't read the description when I picked it up. So as I was playing through the game, I kept going into the area where you would use the beer tap, but I kept not using it, and I was like, I am lost. I don't know where to go. And then I actually was getting ready to pull up a guide and was just kind of going through my inventory, like in typical Resident Evil fashion, like what do I have, what tools, like where have I been, what can I use, and then realized that I have the beer tap. That's where I needed to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's very true. It definitely doesn't hold your hand at points. And then the funny thing when you're talking about that, I was thinking about then when you go to the attic later on and there's a music puzzle, and it's like two extremes, this game, because that is so obvious. There's these giant paintings as you go up the stairs. They have the numbers under them even. But then earlier in the game, when you're looking for the crests with the the model train set to unlock the door, that is very obtuse to figure out what the hell is going on to start with in that puzzle, I thought. And that's a puzzle that encompasses the whole floor as well, which is, it's an interesting element, I suppose, that at times they're hand-holding you hugely, and then at other times it's very much like, well, good luck sort of thing.
And it's one of those deals to where, like, those puzzles, the crest puzzle and the picture puzzle, like, I've seen those before, like the multiple Resident Evil games have had crests, and multiple Resident Evil games have used like some sort of picture, click a button, or these things are numbered, and it was, it's just one of those things where, again, I just felt like this was made by somebody who really has a similar interest as me and enjoys a certain style of game.
Yeah.
So it was cool.
It was cool. And I think what excites me the most about this game, especially coming from a studio like Wales Interactive that are so narrative focused. I mean, the FMV genre is all about the story. That's all there really is, There's action, sure, but it's all about that journey. And to have a game that there is a story here, and the story is told through the collectibles, because the protagonist, Thomas, he doesn't speak at all. There's text, but you never hear him speak. Yet the other female character is voiced in this game, so it's not a choice of not using voice actors. It's a conscious choice to make him mute or whatever in this game, and for you to have to read to find the story. So therefore, it would be totally possible to play a large portion of this game and not realize what's going on. And I felt that as we moved to the end as well. Like, a lot of the game made sense to me in the last hour, I'd say, of the 5 hours. But for a good portion of those first 3 to 4 hours, I didn't really understand why we needed to collect these things, or overall what was going on. And I wonder, is that me? It's highly possible it's me, Darrel. Or did you feel the same way, that the collectibles, even though the notes, even though they did tell a story, some of it was so, again, obtuse, I suppose?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't know which ending you got, but I didn't realize until the ending played out, like, what the purpose for the cylinders or the music notes was for,
Yes.
And it was one of those things to where I don't know if I just missed it. Maybe I didn't pick up all the notes, because in typical Resident Evil fashion, and I know I keep going back to that, but it is just such a good comparison. So if you're listening to the show and you're tired of me saying Resident Evil, I'm sorry, but that's just, this is just, it's almost textbook. But if you miss certain journal entries or you miss certain text, then you're missing part of the story.
Yes.
So, and like you said, the story's told, with the exception of when you listen to, there's like little audio clips you'll hear, and then of course talking to your wife, like, you have to read the journal entries and things like that to know what's going on. And I didn't know, like, with the very end, I didn't know like what was going on, and even there's a one point where you're walking through like a little cave entrance, and there's like a break in the cave, and you see this bird creature. I don't know if you noticed that. So, But yeah, like it was interesting, and I didn't know what that was. I was like, well, I don't know, and it just disappeared.
Yes.
And I'm like, huh. So what ending did you get?
Well, before we get to that, just to touch on that, I remember that section, and it's only there for a moment, and it shimmers away, and I sort of started to think at that point, like, how much of this is real? Is it a surreal experience? Like some of this stuff that you're seeing, it doesn't really exist, because there's blood on the floor as well, but then there's not blood. And then there's, so you hear one of the amazing things about this game, and perhaps the best thing for me, was the sound design. Because yes, after 5 hours, it does get a little repetitive, but there's sounds all the time. As I said, the creaking floorboards, but there are footsteps, and they're not just footsteps on your level. You can hear the footsteps above you, so in the level above. So you're never 100% sure if the enemy is outside the door or if they're the level above you as well. And I found that element it really ratcheted it up for me. I suppose it was unseen force, but particularly this blood, because sometimes you would see the doors shaking. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about this before we get to the endings is, on a lot of games, the AI is put on a track. And so in most games, you watch the pattern, you learn how the AI moves, you know when to move, or whatever else. Now, this game definitely struck me like that until I started to open doors, and then I noticed, oh, mate, the enemy, he goes through the bloody door and starts following, a different path. And there is a high degree, I think, of programming here that allows for some sort of randomness of these moving enemies. I don't know if you saw that in your playthrough, of them actually going through open doors, or sometimes even opening doors they hadn't opened on a previous loop.
Oh, or sometimes they'll walk by a door and it'll fly open. And I even had a few jump scare moments where a door I was getting ready to walk through opened up and there was somebody there.
Yes.
But they weren't coming through it. They were just passing by it.
Yeah.
So,
well, to touch on that, it's an interesting mechanic, because the enemies in the game here, and we did say there's spoilers, so go and, forewarned listeners, the enemies in the game, they cannot detect move. If you're not moving and you're not making a sound, they won't detect you. So you can be standing right beside them, like the door situation. And if you totally freeze, it is possible that they'll just move on from you if they don't bump into you. And I thought that was a clever mechanic. It's not a line of sight thing in this game at all.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. And then, like, you could hold your breath.
Yes.
Like, if you hold the right trigger, you would hold your breath. So there were certain areas where dust or smoke, or even this little purple smoke that they threw out there, which I never saw where it came from. I would just hear glass break and there'd be purple smoke everywhere.
Mm.
But it would cause you to cough, and then it would startle the enemies. So they would walk right by you, look dead at you. But then if you didn't make any noise, they would pass by. So it was pretty neat. It led to some intense moments.
It really did. Now, see, we brought up jump scares. I don't know if you had a particular one that got you, but I'll share mine. I was lost at this point in the game, and I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. And I'd walk past this red. Well, it was a room that you could see into that had red coming out, and there was some weirdness going on with a guy on a chair. There was a lot of moaning going on and everything else. And then you walk through, and I love games that do this, walk through the crawl spaces. It's wonderful, wonderful, like you're trapped in the house. And you end up in this other room, you jiggle the thing around, you went through, and then you end up basically on the other side of this room, this red room or whatever, and then all of a sudden the thing just runs at you, full bore. Now there's glass there, but that thing scared the living shit out of me, and I dropped the controller, and then I paralyzed because the glass was breaking, and I was like, holy shit, it's going to get out of there at some point, and I need to get in there as well. And it was a fantastically intense scare for me. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the one that got me the most was accidental. And I was going through the second floor, the crest area, and I was creeping around with like next to no health. And I went to go through a door, like I said before, and the door swung open, and it popped me. It was like, gosh, it felt right in my chest. And the dude was standing there, but he wasn't walking. And I was like, oh my goodness, killing me.
There's so much uniqueness in that. Now, for me, it wasn't all positives. We've talked loosely about, at times being a little lost or whatever else, but there were two big moments in the game for me that they really detracted. One a lot more than the other. I'm very interested because we haven't talked about this game yet at all. I'm very interested if these came up as problems for you or not at all. The first one I did like, but it was the dream sequence where you walk up to the Jack in the Box. It gives you a nice little scare or whatever, and then you get sucked into this black room basically, and you're moving between figments, if you like, or little stations or scenes within this room, but between them it's pitch black, and you can die in those sections. You take damage or whatever else, and I had a lot of trouble for a while there. I died 3 times there, actually trying to find where the next scene was. And I don't know if that's the way I was playing or just what it was, but I found that it was a little frustrating. I don't know how that scene struck you.
Yeah, there were, like I said before, there was a couple times in the game where I just had trouble figuring out what was next and where to go. And it could be the way I was playing. It could be that there were times where I was playing with headphones on and I didn't have my headphones up, or I had other things going on around me, and so I would say there's a couple things that I found incredibly frustrating. One, I'm playing on an Xbox Slim. The game is not optimized very well. So like if I went to open a door and then go to turn the corner to go in there, it would be so much frame stutter to the point of where sometimes it would jump a few frames ahead, and it would mess me up. Like I'd gotten caught by the enemies a few times that way. I've been killed like that. The actual like motion blur from moving your hands in the game would have like graphically just looked really weird to me. And there was actually a couple sections of the game where I was a little nauseous playing, like it just didn't quite look right.
That's interesting because I played it on the PS4 Pro and I didn't actually thought it ran quite well. So I wonder if perhaps optimization between the different systems was more of an issue for that game.
Maybe.
It's possible. Now, the most annoying part of this game for me, and to be honest with you, Darrel, I played this game in 2 sessions, 2 very long sessions, very late at night, sort of between midnight and 2 a.m. Across 2 consecutive nights while working as well, which is always wonderful, Darrel, when you stay up that late. But so I thought maybe it's me and I'm tired, but I don't think so. It was very, very frustrating, and it was coupled with also, I thought, the best part of the game, and it's where, of course, a wonderful Resident Evil nod, where Abraham busts through the wall. It's the first time you meet the I suppose the character that is almost impossible to stop killing you. He'll definitely kill you if he gets you. Lovely tension, wonderful tension. Took me ages to figure out where the hell I was going to go with him chasing me. Wonderful. Then I found out where I needed to go. Now you need to ring 2 bells. Now not only do you need to ring the 2 bells while you have this thing chasing after you and crashing after you in a short amount of time, you need to ring the bells close enough together that they actually will harmonize to open the gates. Then the window is very narrow, and I understand what they're doing. The tension is through the roof. Everything's going on. If you die, you're going to be back in the save room, or whatever else. This to me though was too much. It was a fatal flaw. The timing wasn't enough. Now, is this because I'm a noob, or did you find this as well?
Now that was in the the 2 bells that are in that little cathedral looking area, where there's not a lot of room to move either.
That's right.
Yeah, I died there too. So
I died there many times.
Yeah, I don't think you're a noob. I think that it was designed intentionally that way.
Yeah, so, yeah. That was funny because we're sort of moving towards the end of the game. When I got to that bit, I was like, well, shit, if the game is going to continue like this, I may not be able to finish it. But then what amazed me, and we're getting towards the end of the game here, the final boss fight, and there aren't many times in the game where you come head to head with the super foe, if you like, and you come head to head with the father, and it's an interesting mechanic in this fight that he's playing the piano. It's a game that's hugely focused on music or whatever else. He's playing the piano, and you need to do a switch puzzle, which you've done many times throughout, but you need to stop moving every time he stops playing. Now, admittedly, I was playing on easy. This was probably, though, the easiest part of the game, and I thought a bit of a letdown for what was supposed to be the final major encounter. How did you find this section?
And it was interesting, you know. I was actually more caught up with the weird relationship with the uncle and the father with Elizabeth, you know, because like the and there's actually a gameplay mechanic I want to talk about too that I thought was really awesome for this game. But I was, you know, that whole build up, that whole weird relationship where the father kind of like owned, and they really make out like he is almost like pimping out his daughter, you know? Like, what was your take on just like that weird relationship with the father character and like his ownership of the daughter, how the uncle was kind of weird as well, and almost like made to be like a security / bodyguard, but seemed like he might have weird intentions, you know?
The funny thing I found with that whole section, of course, it culminates when you get to the attic as well there and find her. But I found it very interesting because having done some reading now after finishing the game and reading more about the book and the folklores that this is based on, the story goes that there wasn't this whether this siren really existed or not in the folklore. It's a bit of a stretch, but the story is that Thomas and, you know, definitely did exist in Elizabeth, and the family disapproved of the relationship with Thomas, you know, a struggling musician, you know, not socially of the same class or whatever as their daughter. And the story goes that they actually locked her in the attic and she starved to death there over, you know, weeks or whatever else. And they basically almost tortured her out. And there's an interesting play that she, you know, up there, she can hear them doing stuff. You know, there's always this time parallel because you're talking on the phone. It's like, you know, they're outside, but it's sort of like, you know, yes, it's happening now, but it's happened before. And she knows that strange experiments are going on and they're doing things or whatever, but she's locked away in her own world, I think, as well. And I think they're tied up in her mental, you know, maybe her mental break from reality as well, I thought. And that's why I wondered if all this is sort of, you know, like, yes, they were torturing people. Yes, they were doing these things, but whether they were doing it and it wasn't some outside force or whatever. Of course, as we get to the end, we see that perhaps not the case, but it's interesting. And then I don't know if you saw at the very end, they have a tombstone or whatever where they have her name on it or whatever else at the thing. And I think that's a nice nod to the story that she does in fact die that way. And I thought, well, because in the game, depending on the ending you get, she doesn't die. And I thought it's an interesting, maybe a play with what it was based on versus them creating their own spin on it, I suppose.
Yeah, I didn't look into any of the endings and like what may or may not be interpreted there. But I did want to mention there's a very cool gameplay mechanic that they use in this game where you have this little like almost like sound grenade.
Yes.
And I can't remember what it's called. It's
the phonic modulator.
Yeah. I thought that was a really interesting, you know, mechanic because the game is essentially like you really can't defend yourself, which I, you know, don't enjoy. And then you have like I would get crowded by, you know, those characters, you know, those enemies, and pop one of those off. And then they start grabbing their ears, you know what I'm saying? They fall to the ground, or they kind of fall to their knees a little bit, some of them. And it gives you a chance to just haul butt and get out of there.
Yes.
And I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah, so you're not totally defenseless, which, yeah, it is it's a nice play on that, I think. But as you say, you can't incapacitate them completely. They do come back, and of course there's an evolution of that with when you sort of kill Abraham, I suppose, with that sort of machine that does the same thing, and you have to get him in that room to do that there at the end of that section. And yeah, it's a cool mechanic, I suppose. I liked as well to move move the story forward. Now, why don't we get to the end then? What I got both ends, and I will preface here that the way the game is structured, and this does lie in achievements and trophies, when you finish the game, you can continue, and that will continue from your last save. So if you do want to farm both endings, it's a good move to make a save right before you go up to the Harmonian in the main hall. You do need to have all 4 of both collectibles, though, the music sheets and the cylinders to get both endings. Did you have all 4, Darrel, or were you forced into one ending or the other?
Well, no. I got I guess what you consider the bad ending. So you get all the cylinders, you turn them in, and then you find out that Elizabeth turns on you. You know, and then, I guess you kind of forced into killing that creature. So, and then, so I was like, well, that was interesting. And I guess I had missed one of those papers, one of the music notes or whatever.
Yes.
So, because I went back and I actually looked up the ending. Like what happens if you don't, because you have the choice, when you talk to her, you're like, hey, what happens if you say, I don't trust you? So then you go and put the papers down and play the song, and then it hurts everyone.
Yeah, it's to be honest with you, I was missing one too, and I cheated. There's a wonderful secret room in the chapel, hidden. You may have missed this as well, behind a statue that opens up, and that takes you to the final manuscript. So it's a bit of a stretch. I don't think you're ever supposed to find that in your first playthrough. I think it's a game that definitely, I was thinking as I played, this is a game that you could definitely learn and play. And then as we sort of move, I suppose loosely to the trophy and achievements, and I know you haven't looked too closely here, but if that does concern you, it is a wonderful list here, Darrel. Now that you've played it, you'll understand how it works, because it is multiple playthroughs, because one of the playthroughs requires you not to interact with the phone calls at all, which in effect are your objectives. They tell you what the objective is. So it would have to be a second playthrough. There is also a no saving playthrough, or a one save playthrough in the whole game, and also a no hit playthrough where nothing touches you. So it's a very challenging list for about half the list as well.
Yeah, and what's crazy is there's that is such traditional survival horror like trophy list, again, call back to the RE games with the one save or less, I don't like lists like that. I think that, me personally, that one of the worst parts about Resident Evil are the trophy lists. They're usually pretty, frustrating. I don't know that they're bad. I don't know that they're overly hard. They're usually ranked, like 5 out of 10s, but they're just frustrating. It's like, when I was younger and I had more time and I would do no save runs all the time. But like now, that's just way more difficult for me and not near as enjoyable.
Yes.
And to the point with the achievements, I don't know that all the achievements pop like they're supposed to on this game, because I had kind of loaded back up into it this evening, and I popped one of the pet the dog achievement, but I had already I had already been past that.
Oh, very delayed then.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's a little. I'm not interested in going for the 100%, so I'm not worried about it. But yeah, overall. I mean, it's cool though if you want to do the extra playthroughs, see the other ending, and then if you're into that kind of challenge when it comes to the horror, because I mean, there's a hard playthrough you have to do. But it's neat, and I imagine, just like any survival horror game, you play through the game the first time to get your bearings. You learn the pattern of, or at least the layout, which there's a lot of rooms in this game.
Yes.
There's a ton of rooms.
Well, also tied to an achievement, and many of the rooms you'll never need to enter. So there's a lot of depth in there, as you say in the list. Now, that sort of links perfectly to my last sort of question to you, but just before we get there, one of the things I really did appreciate in this game, and I'm not going to dwell on the endings that I got, partially because I think the endings are perhaps the weakest point of the narrative in this game. I think the experience is far better than the ending. I I think maybe it sells itself a little short, but definitely not a reason to avoid the game. But one of the things I liked is I'm not a fan of collectibles. I made a decision a long time ago. I'm not going to invest extra time in just hunting down meaningless collectibles. There are, in effect, meaningless collectibles in the Collectible Dolls. They don't add anything to the story. But, Darrel, they do this wonderful thing of playing a creepy song when you get near them. And it just drawed me in. I had to find it once I heard that creepy song. So I did enjoy that mechanic.
That was pretty neat. And actually, when I found my first one, I thought that they I could use them as a weapon. So when I found my first one, and I might have picked up 3 or 4 of them before I realized, I was like, wait a minute, these don't do I can't do anything with them. They're not in my inventory. But I thought I'd be able to like set one down, wind it up, set it down, it play a song, attract the enemies, and I could go run across the room.
Yeah, they could have done a lot more. I agree, a lot more with it, I think. So before we sort of wrap up our final thoughts on it, if you like, this game did receive middling reviews from across the board on the review sites. But the number one thing that I read, the number one criticism of this game, and I know we keep coming back to Resident Evil, but it is in direct homage to it. So if you did like that series, I think you'll find value here. But the number one critique of this game was that it didn't bring anything new to the Resident Evil formula. As a fan of that series, how do you feel about that statement?
I mean, I don't disagree with that. I think that it was interesting. It was neat, and it's a first person game that the sound grenade I thought was cool. Holding your breath when enemies walk by, when you walk through dust and things like that, I thought it was cool. Are they completely original? Nah, not really. As far as the setting and the atmosphere and stuff like that, I thought that was cool. There is a bit of a BioShock vibe to it. And I can't tell if it's because Elizabeth looks like a little sister, or if it's the aesthetic in the mansion or in the hotel, because there's certain rooms where they have like the collectibles and stuff like that. There's like the ship, the model ship that's in there. There's the what looks like the old style submarine, or diver helmet, the big steel metal, helmets or whatever. It looks like a Big Daddy helmet. There's just certain things in there that like, it gave me a bit of a BioShock vibe. But overall, I mean, that was interesting. I don't think it's the best game I've played in 2020, but it's definitely not the worst. And I thought it was a very interesting game, and I think it's worth a play, especially being a Games with Gold. I think that this is the type of game that makes that service worth having. Yes. I don't think, and this is me personally, but like Games with Gold and PlayStation Plus, I don't think those should be your big AAA games or your super obscure indie games, Like, I think that this is a middle of the road, like it's a unique game. You might not be one you would buy, right off the rip. The production quality and the value is good. I think this is a perfect style game to give away on that service. So, hey, you might not have ever heard of Wales Interactive. Check out this game that they did, because I think it's definitely, if this was my first interaction with them, I'm like, oh, well, I'll definitely go see what else they do, or keep my eye out for their next game.
It's a good verdict, and I think probably for me, listeners, I think this is an interesting game because I'm not a massive fan of Resident Evil and survival horror games. I think this game fits perfectly, at the 5-hour range. I think this game fits perfectly for someone like me. I got this feeling the whole way through this game. If you're not a connoisseur of this style of game, if you're not a big fan of, being chased, being under pressure, having a huge amount of stealth, having to react in short amounts of time, having to replay sections over and over again, if you miss save rooms and things, then I think this is it's a wonderful game because it doesn't, on an easy setting, admittedly, it doesn't stretch you beyond what is comfortable. Sure, there's a few tense moments, but there's not an underlying tension that's continuous like we talked about with the Resident Evil 2 remake. There are many quiet moments as well that you can compose yourself. I thought there's enough in the story to warrant what you're looking at. And if for no other reason, Darrel, it is one of, and even though I thought Resident Evil 2 Remake had perhaps the best sound design, I think this is not far from it either. I think there's some wonderful sound design at play here. Play the game in headphones, play it in the dark, and experience it. And I think for 5 hours you'll come away having a great, horrific, I suppose, Darrel, time.
Heck yeah, man, that was good. So, CJ, actually, I wanted to thank you for picking this game. Like, this is not our first deep dive together, and I think this was a good choice. I think that good job, man. That was a good call.
And I would like to in turn thank Xbox Gold, because I did pick this game up months ago and didn't play it, and it's wonderful that it came out like it did and reminded me. So we both got on top of it.
Heck yeah.
So I think we were lucky, and I believe you've been booked via someone on the Discord for a deep dive in the near future on the Little Hope game. So I look forward to more.
That will happen. That will definitely happen. I am very excited about the Dark Pictures anthology Little Hope. I'm really, really, really into that developer and the games that they put out, and this one's really got my attention.
Well, look, until next time, listeners, have a wonderful night. Play something a little spooky, even if you don't like the horror. Maybe even play some Maids of Sker. Have a wonderful night. We'll catch you again soon. Thank you, Darrel.
Thank you.